All right, what's going on, everyone? So today I thought we would run through a video released by Hamas on their Al-Qassam Telegram channels showing their forces ambushing the IDF in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. Now, I wanted to highlight this and walk through what we see, what we don't see, and some big takeaways, because I think it's easy to view a war like this and think, how does Hamas have any chance up against a modern military like the IDF? All right, we've got an insurgent terrorist organization using AK-47s, RPGs, and homemade weapons to a degree, especially when it comes to the IEDs or improvised explosive devices. How do they stand any sort of a chance against a modern force like Israel with jets, drones overhead, tanks, etc.? However, I think this clip will show that Hamas, the tactics that organizations like this use, are still very deadly and can be very effective, especially in an urban setting like Gaza today. Then before diving in, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Delete Me, which is the tool that I use in this never-ending, nonstop war in trying to protect my personal data online. So Duke University ran a study recently where they're able to purchase location, health, and financial data from current and former military members for as little as 12 cents per record, which is crazy. Now, the reason I bring that up is I know a lot of you watching these videos are either current military, former military, or associated or interested in some way, shape, or form with the armed forces or national security subjects. And just think about that. Think about what a malicious actor could do if they're able to compile that amount of data points on you, me, or really anyone they want. It's crazy. Now, I'm not going to pretend, and Delete Me doesn't say in any of their marketing that they're able to entirely remove all of your personal data from the internet. It's a never-ending fight, unfortunately, which is why Delete Me has a subscription service, and that's the one that I use, where they monitor these data broker sites that compile your information, and then whenever your data shows up, they contact the data broker and have your personal data removed. So here's a look at my most recent report. Delete Me reviewed over 4,500 listings and removed 44 of them across 40 different data brokers, which included 195 total pieces of personal identifiable information just out there on the internet. So 195 fewer, fortunately, floating around at this point. So honestly, something that you should at least consider taking action on, right? Whether you're active duty, former military, associated with national security organizations, or just an average citizen, your data is out there floating around. Delete Me is one tool you can use to try to fight back. So check out the link in the description. Start protecting yourself and your family with Delete Me, and use code Preston for 20% off all consumer plans. All right, so getting right into the video here, we're going to see an opening scene where they're kind of laying out how they expect this ambush to play out, and they're using military symbols. Now, a note that I feel like is worth mentioning is it's not entirely clear if what we're seeing right here was taken before or after the ambush, because this is very close to how it actually plays out. It's not quite this clean as you would see on a piece of paper, but you can see on the left side, they're showing infantry forces moving in. On the bottom right, kind of, that's an armored unit moving in. And you're going to see both of those play out in this ambush. So this was not just, again, Hamas militants deciding, like, there's some Israelis, let's go shoot. They deliberately set this up, knew where Israel was going to move through, set up their IEDs, set up their anti-tank units, set up their riflemen, their machine guns, and executed this ambush, what we would call a complex attack, pretty effectively. Now, quick note on that, it's a real challenge in any war zone when the enemy is able to easily identify where you're going to move. Now, whether that map that we saw the Hamas fighters laying out was actually done beforehand or after, either way, you can see from this clip that they know exactly where the Israeli forces are going to come from. That's a problem in a war zone. I also want to point out that as we get ready to show the Israeli forces moving here, it doesn't look like they're probing or doing any sort of search for IEDs, improvised explosive devices, or mines on the battlefield. You'll see the first soldier move through, and it doesn't appear that a primary threat in his mind are those IEDs. Again, we're taking one snapshot off the battlefield, so I don't want to apply this across the entire IDF, but that was noticeable, especially because the next clip that we have here in that same video from Hamas is showing them lay out a bunch of these IEDs across this kill zone, if you will. They set up a handful of different cameras that we'll see them use throughout, but some of these are pretty significant shape charges, anti-personnel devices, and it looks like with these wires moving through, and you can see just how challenging it would be, one, to see these IEDs or mines, directional mines anywhere, just how rubble, the amount of rubble across that battlefield. But it looks like with these wires, they're likely command detonated. And we've talked about that in previous videos, where command detonated is the positive from the Hamas perspective is that they can push a button and detonate that IED exactly when they want. I'm going to pause it real quick before the Israeli soldiers move in. So the command detonated can be triggered exactly when the militant wants it to go off, right? It's not going to, it still could accidentally go off at varying times, but you have the option. You push the button, it goes. It cannot be jammed, usually, because it's a wired connection directly from the trigger to the IED. There's a benefit there. The downside is you have to be relatively close sometimes, right? I mean, how much wire are you going to lay across the battlefield? And then that wire, of course, can give away the location of the IED. So for whatever reason, it is notable that Hamas, in this case, appears to be using command detonated IEDs. So they have to be relatively close to set them off. And it looks like it's not a major concern that there's wires running across the ground, which, again, if you look at this kill zone, where this battle's playing out, it's understandable. It'd be very hard to see one wire and decide that amongst everything else is the major concern. So turning back, we've got Israeli forces coming into view here, and you'll see a group. This is maybe a squad as big as a platoon-size element that we see taking part in this fight, or in this ambush, really. I've not seen, in some cases, we get the Israeli point of view provided later via the IDF. Haven't seen that from this clip quite yet. But you see some of the militants lining up, and then this is one of the camera angles they set up. I'm actually going to cut the clip here in just a moment, because what happens is you've got two Israeli soldiers moving through the lead part of the element. Hamas opens fire, and I've said this in previous videos. I don't like to show the portion of any of these videos where a life is taken. And it looks like, I've watched through this video a couple times, looks an awful lot like at least one, maybe more Israelis were killed in this opening burst of gunfire. It was very accurate. Looks like it's hard to see where the shots were fired from, but given the accuracy of those rounds, I mean, the first couple shots impacted the lead soldier. So you have to expect that this was relatively close, maybe even inside of 50 or 100 meters when they pulled the trigger. In terms of the battle damage here, it looks an awful lot like that first soldier is not moving once he's on the ground. There's a second one behind him that was clearly hit down. You see him moving around a little bit. And eventually it looks like some of his fellow soldiers come in and try to move him off the battlefield. Not sure. Even looking through some of the Hamas statements, they actually didn't say how many IDF soldiers they killed or wounded in this engagement. Then we've got a similar camera angle here. This looks like the same spot where those soldiers were. Yeah, you can kind of, in the upper corner, start to see where the gunfire is impacting. And it's just another camera that that Hamas had set up in this kill zone. It's not, maybe they use this to identify when the IDF forces were moving through. Maybe they're using it for what we're seeing right now, which is after the fact, they can put out footage showing that this attack took place. The other part here that they highlight is engaging Israeli tanks that, given how this bounces around a little bit, it's hard to say definitively that this is exactly part of this same engagement. Again, looking at that picture at the very beginning, it appears that this is what they planned for. And we're going to see a couple strikes against these Israeli tanks as they move into this kill zone that it appears that Hamas identified and somewhat tried to lure Israel into. There's the first strike on this tank, and it's not entirely clear what it is that strikes the Israeli tank. It does not look like an RPG. The arc comes in, not quite a top-down attack, but kind of like it's falling on the tank. And you're going to see another one here. Could use some input from the audience, somebody who's better at identifying munitions in this capacity than I am. Maybe some kind of RKG grenade, handheld anti-tank device type thing where it kind of, you throw it, there's a parachute that deploys of sorts, and it kind of slows its descent near the tank. It might be one of those. For both of those engagements against the tank, it's hard to say. It looks like both hit the tank, but it's hard to say if either one of those was fully destroyed. You're going to see we kind of move away from showing those tanks. They don't go up in flames. There's no major secondary explosion. Based off of this footage, those tanks, there might have been some casualties suffered. They might be disabled. They also might have just driven off as soon as this engagement was complete. It's not unusual for Hamas, any insurgent organization fighting in the capacity that Hamas is, to not film significant battle damage assessment. They're going to carry out these strikes and get out of there as fast as possible. They're not going to, it's the rare militant that's going to run up to the tank and find out for sure whether or not that crew was killed, or if the tank is just waiting for them to exit their cover and try to do something like that. So a couple of things I wanted to key in on, and the first and foremost here is it's pretty clear based off of this video and how this engagement took place that Hamas knew exactly where these IDF forces were going to move through. Again, I have to view that initial map with a little skepticism because they very well could have drawn that after the ambush took place. But it looks an awful lot like they know this is where the infantry is going to move through. This is where the armor is going to come to support when the infantry gets engaged. That's a problem. And I think it shows some of the challenges in urban warfare. Right? There's only so many places. If you want to get tanks from point A to point B, there's only so many places they can go. Even when you're talking about a squad or platoon of dismounted soldiers, there's only so many places that they can go to get from point A to point B. And in some of these locations, again, this one apparently in and around the Khan Yunis area in the central portion of the Gaza Strip, it looks like in some areas Hamas has those pretty well mapped out, which is how this type of fighting plays out, right? They have the home field advantage, if you will. They have the tunnel networks moving into some of these locations. They have the ability to pop up from some of those tunnels or find weapons caches around the city that they previously stored weapons and set up these kill zones before Israeli forces move in. But big picture, again, the takeaway that I hopefully relay here is that the Hamas militants, Hamas as an organization, is not to be easily discarded. They are still very lethal. They're still very capable and can inflict significant damage on the Israeli forces all across the Gaza Strip. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out our Substack, linked in the description below. We've renamed the Substack to Between the Lines with Preston Stewart because we're bringing on experts and analysts and researchers and other writers. It's not just me. I am still contributing, still uploading videos there, ad-free videos that go there. But we're bringing in a lot of people to talk about different aspects like Hezbollah, like Islamic State Khorasan province, like attacks inside of Russia or Ukraine attacking Russian forces in Africa, and quite a bit more. I think it's pretty interesting. All of those articles are free and, again, linked in the description if interested. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.